You're listening to Where You Live with Gene Sullivan.
Welcome back to Where You Live. I'm Gene Sullivan, broadcasting from the True North Painting Studios. And the show is also brought to you by American Family Insurance, the Kim Bennett Agency, and Extreme Exteriors. We've got a regular guest and friend to the show, attorney Dan Greenstein, who's going to be with us in a moment because we have a question from one of our listeners, and we're going to get Dan's thoughts on it. But before we do, I'd like to let our listeners know two things. First, we have a newsletter that we put together bi-monthly called What's New. A lot of what we talk about on the show is discussed in further detail. It's yours, free for the asking. It's a great resource. Give us a call at New Concepts at 952-922-2500 and ask for Lori. She'll make sure that you start receiving it either electronically or by mail. And lastly, I'd like to just remind our listeners, a week from today, we will be live at the Minnesota State Fair. So we will have that Saturday show at 10 a.m. We'll be live, so it'll be a call-in, so you can ask your questions. Come on out and see me. And then also the following week, that whole week at the State Fair, we'll be broadcasting live between the 4 and 5 o'clock p.m. Drive home. So give me a call with your questions. Come on out to the State Fair. It's going to be a great week. Well, I want to welcome to the show, as we have so many times before, Dan Greenstein with Bernick Lifson. Hi, Dan.
Hello, Gene. I'm happy to be here.
I'm glad that you could take some time to answer this question. A homeowner wrote and said, I serve on the board of our association, and I've heard that other HOAs have formed what is called a fining or a grievance rules enforcement committee. I was told that that is how they administer the fining process when a member fails to comply on a rule in a homeowners association. My question is, are they a good idea? How should they be set up? Let me begin by asking, Dan, do you see this among many HOAs, that they have a specific grievance or rules enforcement committee?
You know, Gene, I think most of the time in an HOA, it's the members are happy if they have enough board members that are willing to serve.
I would agree.
And there's not that many extra people asking to be on a rule violation or grievance committee. In cooperatives, which are a bit of a different animal, cooperatives typically have committees to help in everything, and part of the membership requirement in a cooperative often can be you have to serve on some of the committees for a certain number of hours, years, or as part of your membership obligation.
Sure.
But in a typical HOA, even though the statute allows for just this type of thing, I have not seen many separate committees. Usually it falls right back to the board.
I would agree. I don't know that I've seen a lot of HOAs have a lot of extra committees. I think that, like you said, they would, by and large, just enjoy knowing that there's enough people that will serve on the board. Does this seem a little bit formal, do you think, or could be a little bit formal and off-putting to homeowners?
Well, look, it is formal, but I think formality in some senses is good because it requires a new committee, a new set of members to review a complaint or an alleged rule violation, and before a fine or some consequence is levied on a member who's apparently violated one of the rules, there's a serious group of folks who are willing to look into it, be impartial, and hopefully do a service to their association. It is formal, but when you're following some of the duties that you have in an association, like the duty to enforce the rules, sometimes a little bit of formality is a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. What I think is positive about something like this is, some people say when they approach the board of directors generally to ask for an exemption in some area, or they received a violation notice. They feel that the association, quote unquote, is being ruled by just this small handful of people. When you have a process like this, people get to see that it's more than just this small handful of people, but other folks that are just homeowners know, understand, and appreciate those rules as well.
I agree, and it's another way to get people involved, so the association or the HOA is getting the input of more than just the 3, 5, or 7 board members. You're adding additional homeowners to the mix who can help and contribute and hopefully be fair and equitable with all of the members.
Okay.
It's another group of people who are participating in the HOA.
Yeah. Now, the listener also said their question is not only was it a good idea, but how should they be set up? And so this person's asking, what should be considered for good protocol in a proper rules enforcement committee and how that should take place? What would you think?
Well, okay, first of all, where does the authority come from? In the statutes that govern most HOAs in Minnesota, all of the powers fall to the board of directors. But in this one area, it says that the board can impose interest and late charges, and after a notice and opportunity to be heard before the board or a committee appointed by it, fines can be levied. So I think the board is in charge of appointing a committee to hear about the grievances or rule violations, and I think they need to handle it in this fashion. First, they need to send out a notice that they're thinking about appointing a committee, and they have to get nominations or people willing to serve. And then, depending on, they probably want an odd number of members on this committee so there are no ties when it comes to voting. And I'm going to suggest 3 or 5 members, again, depending on how many volunteers you can get and the size of each HOA. And then I think the board needs to vote in the members. So if you have more people willing to serve than positions you've set up to be on this committee, I think the board needs to act in a manner in which they vote in, and the 3 or 5 volunteers with the most votes will serve on the board.
Yeah.
Oh, I shouldn't say the board, on the committee, and the board will set a term for those people to serve, be it 1 year, 2 years, or more, and I think it's as simple as that.
If I could use an analogy, one that comes to my mind, it's kind of like a judge with a jury. A jury is selected to give their say, but it's under the direction of the judge, who kind of gives the scope of things that they need to remember. And when you deal with a committee, no matter what it is, rules enforcement, maintenance committee, whatever it is, they still take their direction from the board, who should be giving them input as to what's important to remember and how to come to a decision.
And what about this situation, Gene? What if the board elects a committee to hear fines and violations of the rules and declarations, and the committee reports back and they've reached a decision on a particular case, and the board doesn't like the decision? Consider what happens in that case.
Well, and I'm sure that probably has happened a few times. But I tell you what, I would like to talk about that. I think that's a good point. But we need to take a break right now. You can stay for our next segment, can't you, Dan?
Sure, absolutely.
Great, thanks. We're talking to attorney Dan Greenstein, and we're going to talk with him further after these messages.